generation. She said something like, if something happens to me, ask you Janie, she knows everything. So maybe you can imagine if things were at ground zero and I asked you about storage units. Well, besides being a hoot and a fun-loving gal, and besides having the most exquisite jewelry you have ever seen, Eugenie has been instrumental in moving estate items by the dozens, by the hundreds, from storage units, living spaces, to outsourcing where they should go. And foremost, always being there for Anne as her fun friend. And then lastly, Lynn Pasqua is over there hiding behind the wall. And she has clients at the forum who she's a companion, helps with doctor's appointments and many other things, which I don't know her full job description, but she seems to do everything. And as far as Aunt Dodie was concerned, she took her to some of her doctor's appointments, visited her, and generally kept an eye on her when she worked around the forum. And Aunt Dodie always considered her a wonderful friend, as did I when I was here. And I really enjoyed Easter Sunday church when she invited me when I was here. I don't know if there's any in here, but I wanted to thank all the employees at the forum that have been a great part of Anne's life. We are so appreciative of their knowledge, guidance, love, help, and patience with Anne, and also with me as I have communicated with them over the years. And it's just the amazing work that they do, really. I mean, there's like no greater appreciation that family members have to know that their loved ones are well taken care of. And I think we've all been there. And I wanted to thank Pastor Park for being here. We really appreciate it. It was a blessing. And also to John Davis, our piano accompaniment. And so lastly, which is a huge thing, but I have such a little amount because I don't know, is that in regards to friends, the friends that she has here in California, you are Anne's family. And she loved California, and she loved her life, and she loved so many of you who knew her more than any of us did. And I'm delighted in meeting some of you, but I haven't met all of you, and many of us would love to hear a story or two that you might share with us of your times with her. And now would be a good time for that. So we have a microphone girl, and if anybody wants to say anything, we can just bring the microphone around. So
I'm going to start on this side.
Does this work?
Okay, yes, it works.
My name is Jane Sperry Eisenstadt, and I came from Philadelphia, and I know all the East Coast cities, and Ann and I often used to talk about our girlhoods, how different it is from today. We had a good time, and the war memories. She was in the service, I believe, wasn't she? Was she in the service?
I don't think she was in the
She
service.
remembers. We talked over
husband
the
was in the service.
4 years.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the service, but I was around then in the same area. We had a lot in common. We had a good many memories together growing up.
I just wanted to say that I bought so many wonderful things in the heirloom estates. Starting in about 1970, I had to find homes for many of those things when I moved to the forum. But she was quite a force with her business, and we were quite in admiration of Anne. And when I moved here, there she was. And I moved here in time to talk to her about it a little bit. And that was a big part of her life. And I'm so glad I knew her.
I'm Fran Ragnow, and I believe I worked on the very first sale that Anne did in San Jose. It was for a professor's widow, and she was very uncertain about the whole thing. And Anne was rather chaotic to work for, and got a little bit better as time went along. But my husband died about 3 years ago, and every night when I went to sleep, I had a dream, and the dream was always a repeat of a house sale. The same chaos that existed in reality existed in my dreams. And nothing improved over the period of years, which was many, many years. And I don't know how many of you are here that were in the first group of volunteers, but we all worked many years and became great friends.
My name is Rosa Inikian, and I did Anne's hair for 25 years. I saw her every week, and she was a wonderful person. We were very close. She worked so hard the days, times that she had the sales. She worked so hard, it's just unbelievable. I have a lot of good memories. I don't know where to start and where to end, but I also remember that in recent years, she had lost her sense of smell. So I was a smeller for her. She had to smell her perfumes and colognes. And tell her if it smells good on her or not, you know. If she had anything new, I had to smell it for her first. And one difficulty that Anne had was it took her a long time to get used to wearing pants that they all wear these days. So she had all these beautiful skirts, you know, that she had from, I don't know, 60s, or she had saved it until, I'm going to say maybe 5-6 years ago, and it's been out there, yeah. And she always complained that she couldn't find good clothes anymore. I miss her a lot, yeah. She was a wonderful person. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Gloria Grimmer. I'm sitting next to Margot McCann. We used to play bridge with Anne. And back before I moved into the Forum, I lived up on top of a mountain with a very steep driveway with a lot of curves in it. And she drove this great big station wagon. And she would bounce off one side of the road and the other side of the road coming up. And my neighbors would say, "Who was that that came up to your house?" But we had a lot of fun together. And she used to speak so highly of Leslie up there, right?
Yeah, right over here.
I am Joan Ragno, Fran's daughter-in-law, and I attended many of the estate sales over the years. And my memory of Anne is as a very capable, can-do person who always seemed to remain calm despite perhaps the chaos behind the scenes. But to those of us from the outside coming in to look at the things at the estate sales, everything seemed very organized because you had the book people and you had the jewelry people and you had the art glass people and the kitchenware and the furniture, and it all seemed to the casual person coming through the sale, it seemed very organized.
Just to add, because Leslie mentioned the gifts that we would all get at Christmas time and for wedding gifts, etc. I think a lot of those came from the estate sales.
Thank you. I don't know whether any of you might wonder how Anne got here. I'm supposed to swallow this. But I can share some information on that, I think, because the reality is that there were 3 couples of us that were longtime good friends. As a matter of fact, their home was within sight of our residence in Los Altos Hills, and we got to know them through the women's bridge groups and so on. But the point that I'm really making is that we had the pleasure of going about 12 or 15 times as a group of 10 or 15 to the Big Sur for several days of outing that were just magical. And we had, we tended out and we ate out and had, as a matter of fact, one year had a pig that was cooked underground and so on, and had live lobster and had a lot of good food for sure, and but a lot of great fellowship, and it was a binding experience. And as a result, there were 3 couples here, including the Eagles that are right here beside me, and Bob and Barbara Brown, and my wife Ruth and I. And incidentally, Barbara Brown was supposed to have been brought here in a wheelchair from the healthcare center, but somehow they haven't done it. And I'll talk to them about that. But in any event, we were really close to one another geographically in our residences, and we were really, it was a great pleasure to share the social time and several days every year, and this encampment was something that was a real binding force for us.
So, can I go ahead over here?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Judith Ann, and I was named after Ann Spencer. And I'm the third of 4 children. I'm her niece, and Leslie is my older sister, and Chandler's my younger sister, and as Leslie said, my brother isn't here. But because I was named after her, I took quite an interest in her life as I grew up. And I kept wondering, when you have someone's name, what does that mean? What's the responsibility of that? You know, are you like them? Are you supposed to be like them? So I would watch her and study her a lot when we would see her, which wasn't a lot. But when I think of her, I think of a heart of gold, I think of a twinkle in her eye, and I want to add the word mischievous, but not in a bad way. You know, I just always felt like she was a worldly woman, and if I could have a chat with her and I wasn't a relative, I might hear some really fascinating stories about her and her life. She was definitely a free spirit, and I can see, having grown up on the East Coast and knowing Philadelphia somewhat too, I was born there and my parents were raised there, I can see how she fell in love with California, and it sort of set her free to be herself. And I definitely think that hers was not a typical life. So when I think about the kind of person whose absolute love is doing estate appraisals and traveling around the world, you can tell that they would be a person who would be interested in everybody and everything, you know, getting into their business, right, without them really knowing it. Wanting to know and learn as much as they can, that there would never be a dull moment in her life, and that she would be fascinated with all parts of life. And I kept always imagining the people she must have met and known in her life, all the different stages. And my mother was a mother who stayed at home. She was very active in the community, so she was a stay-at-home mom in the best sense of the word. But when my Aunt Dodie would come to visit, I know she's one of the reasons that I grew to love traveling so much, because in her I saw such a strong woman, someone who would go all over the world. And I was always looking at how she made a difference in our lives. She lived in California. That was that mysterious place. And we spent more time talking about her, that her house was on this fault line. And how does anybody go about their day when they live on the San Andreas Fault? And I remember when I became an adult and I went to visit her, I was so excited, but I must tell you, I was so anxious. The whole time I was in California, because it was one of my first trips here, I was sweating profusely thinking, I wonder if I'm going to get through this trip without the big one happening. And I would go up to her house and be, you know, she'd be talking to me and I'd be, where's the fault line? Is it sit right here, and I would end up asking her all these questions, and inevitably, no matter what topic she brought up, I'd bring her right back to, tell me about the earthquakes. Because East Coast people, you know, we have such dull lives compared to people in California. So anyways, she would come to visit us on the East Coast. She always remembered all of us on birthdays and Christmases. Whenever I would talk to her throughout my whole life, she was always genuinely interested in everything I was doing. And it was never in a nosy way or an inappropriate way. It was just with so much love. And she would ask me about everybody and everything in the family as well. And I want to just go a little bit further about these Christmas boxes we would get. So when you give Christmas gifts to people, it's within the range of normal, usually, right? You might get a bottle of perfume, or you might get a pair of socks, or, you know, if someone made you a handicraft, that was always so special. With Aunt Dodie, the way she would come into our Christmas so that we would know her and she could be part of our lives, she would send us a box. So there were the 4 kids and the 2 parents, and we would open up the box, and in the box there would be all these different gifts from around the world. The problem was, we never knew what any of them were. She would, sometimes they would have our names on it and we would know they were for us, and that was pretty exciting. But other times they just were for whoever would like this. And we'd pull something out and we'd look at it and we'd all kind of, then we'd laugh and then we'd talk about it, and as the years went by, we would spend a good half hour on Christmas morning, and that's a lot of time to donate to anybody at that time of the year. We would talk about, did this come from Africa? Did this come from China? What could this possibly be used for? And she loved it because we would call her after we opened our presents and say, oh, Aunt Dodie, please tell us what this is. Because she couldn't stand not to know. And she would just love that. She would laugh and laugh and then tell us what it was. So as I became an adult, it was such a joy for me to speak with her more deeply and to visit with her, to share experiences and see more of the California that she loved, and just being here these last few days. What a beautiful place you all live in. Oh, she was so blessed to be here. And sending her things that crossed my path to appraise all the time. I was so fascinated that I could hold something up in front of her and say, what is this? And she would say, oh, that comes from 1812, and so forth and so on, used it, and it's worth this much today. And I just thought that was incredible that she had that gift. Her gifts always reflected, as we got older, the things that we loved. I noticed she would give us something because Leslie's favorite color was blue, or mine was this, or Chandler's was that. And I remember one year, she, I guess, asked my mother, is there anything that anyone really needs? And I didn't have a chest of silver. I had some china and I had some crystal from my marriage, but I didn't have any silver. And under the Christmas tree was the chest of silver that had come through her estate sale. So that just always meant so much time, so much to me. So I'm also representing my parents today. My mom is the last remaining Eigler of the siblings, and she's 92 years now. And she is in the last stage of Alzheimer's. And even having said that, she has that beautiful Eigler love and kindness. And I asked her, I tried to explain to her that we were all going to California to be at the service today, where she should be here if anyone should be. And I asked her, Mom, what do you want me to say for you about your sister? And they were, 8 or 9 years apart in age? You know, sometimes when kids are that far apart, they never get close to each other. But Aunt Dodie was very protective of both Janice, my mother, and Edwin, our cousin's father. And she said 2 things, and then she couldn't come up with anything else. But the more I think about what she said, it's wonderful. She said, Dodie was a very good friend to me my whole life. She didn't say sister, she said friend. And she said, and she had so many boyfriends. So I tried to pull it out of her, what she was remembering, but it just wasn't there. I couldn't get the story out. And my dad, of course, said her forte was her appraisal ability. Now, I want to tell you this story, and I'll be really quick, but she lived up right in this house, and she had these estates. And those of you who knew her well knew that a lot of the things that were left over from the estate accumulated. And she had a very, it's an understatement, I know. She had a very hard time throwing anything away. So as she got older, when we would ask to go visit her, she would say, "You can't come in the house." And we would say, "It's okay, we don't care." And she'd say, "No, you can't come in the house. I'll meet you down the hill at a restaurant." Well, she allowed my son and I to come visit her. And when we would come, she would talk to us outside on the patio. And then one day she let us in, and her living room was just filled with things. And she had a chair in the center. And we visited with her there, and we're helping her clean up some things. And a couple days went by, and she was getting more comfortable with us coming into the house. And I went in one day about noon, and she said to me, "I don't know if I'm getting older, but I have to tell you something." And I had never seen my aunt anything but confident and independent. And I said, "What's wrong, Aunt Dodie?" And she said, "I don't know if I should say this, but I'm hearing voices." And I said, "You're hearing voices?" I said, "That's okay." I said, don't be worried. She said, "No, you don't understand. I hear them every single day at the same time." And she said, "I must be losing my mind or something." She said, "Sometimes I think maybe because I live on the top of a hill, I'm tapping into a police report or the FBI or the Secret Service." You know, she just couldn't imagine what these voices were. And I said, "Okay, when do you hear them?" She said, "In about 10 minutes. And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, good, I'm here, and I'm going to listen for the voices with you." And she said, "Really?" And I said, "Yes." So we sat down, and we sat, and she said, "Do you hear the voices?" And I was kind of nervous I wasn't going to hear them, and then what do you say? Because so I said, "Yes, I actually do hear voices." She said, "You do? I'm so glad." She got tears in her eyes because she was so concerned that she was, losing her marbles up there. And she said, "Okay." And I said, "Aunt Dodie, just wait a minute." So I'm wading through, and I get down to the bottom of a pile where the voice is literally talking. And I pull it out, and there's a battery-powered watch that's giving directions how to set the watch. And it was all mumbled. So my aunt had been hearing this for months, every day at the same time. So, Aunt Dodie, you're now free from that voice. But I send her so much love, and I'm so grateful for all of you who are part of her life. Anyway, okay.
All right, I was actually, I had prepared words, but so many of them have already been said. I just have to say that she truly was an amazing woman, as has been shared with us by all of you, and that's why you all are here. She definitely had that idler twinkle, as has been mentioned many times. She had that very teasing sense of humor. She had that, "I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. I don't need you to hear about me." She just wanted to be interested in everybody else. She was an extremely independent and courageous woman. And I will wrap it up with one story that I am constantly telling everybody. When our father, her younger brother, passed away 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, so Aunt Dodie was 90 at that point. My parents lived in Connecticut. And Aunt Dodie was definitely going to come to the funeral. And myself and my siblings were very involved in planning the funeral, and just assumed that everybody had their own way of getting to Connecticut. And it wasn't till the day of the funeral that I learned that Aunt Dodie had gotten a ride with her friend to the airport, to a hotel. She was spending the night because she had an early flight the next morning. And her friend took her out to dinner and then said goodnight to her, and she went up to her room, had her alarm set for 4:30 in the morning because she had a 5 o'clock shuttle to get her to the airport, and she woke up at 4:45, completely flipping out because she thought she'd missed the shuttle and missed her flight. And she said, as she said, the arthritis in her fingers made it difficult to button her blouse quickly, so she went down to the shuttle half undressed, but got to the airport, got on the plane, flew all the way across the country, landed in New York, got herself onto a bus, took the bus from JFK Airport all the way to the Port Authority on the other side of Manhattan, then got in a subway to Grand Central Station in Manhattan, where she then took 2 trains to get to Connecticut and then a cab to get to the bed and breakfast where she was staying for her brother's funeral the next day. I had assumed that she would fly to Hartford to her sister's house and get a ride with them, or if I'd known she was flying to Kennedy, I had 3 sons who could have picked her up from the airport. But this was Aunt Dodie. She was independent. She wanted to do things her way, not to bother anybody else, but she wouldn't have missed being there for anything in the world. As all of you are here today, I'm sure that she is looking down on all of you and thinking what pleasure and joy you gave to her each and every day that she knew you, and is so grateful for all of you to be here. So we thank you very much.
I'm sure you have more stories and memories that I want to encourage you to share more after service, maybe at the session here. We really want to thank God for Anne's life, and the joy of loving her and being loved by her. She kept her faith, lived her life faithfully, and loved others fully. We trust with her days with God in full of joy. We thank God for the precious love, memory that you shared also, and legacy of her life, and her wonderful spirit through which she will continue to live in our hearts. Friends, go with this blessing. The love of God, the grace of the Lord of Jesus Christ, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all now and always and evermore. Amen.
We wanted everyone to sing I'll Be Seeing You, and then we're going to play I Left My Heart in San Francisco, 2 songs that we thought she would love.
Let's sing that.
Please join us. We're going to start at the familiar part, I'll Be Seeing You, but the piano will lead us into that.
All the old
say something?
Stuff up here, please help yourself and. Oh, is there any more stories? I had one more story. Oh, there more stories. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It's a little late in the afternoon, but I couldn't resist just saying goodbye to my friend Ann, because we knew Ann, Ellen knew her when she worked for Ellen's boss at SRI in 1950.
She was the administrative assistant to my boss's boss.
Yes.
Stanford Research Institute.
That's right. And then Don was at Stanford Business School, and so we saw them at all the business school events. And that's what they lived in, like a regular, ordinary, nice house in Palo Alto. And then they discovered the high hills of Los Altos Hills. And so that was quite a change, and we had such a good time there so many times, because then some years later, we actually also moved to Los Altos Hills, but we were up on the mountain like that. And then there were times when we had, I remember one time, we had a sort of a brunch wine hiking party. And with some of our friends, we started at our house, which was in the lower high hills, and then we walked to Mel and Ruth's house, which was a little still in the medium high hills, and then we walked to Ann and Don's house, where you had to go down into the Moody Canyon, and then you had to hike up to get there, and there we had the end of the party. And so we all had this marvelous time hiking the Los Altos Hills to different places, and so that was so much fun. And then also, Mel didn't say the costumes that Ann and Don had for this wonderful campout. And by the way, this was the campout where the Stevens owned, or part of owners of a very large property up on the top of the in Monterey, on the top of the mountain in the Big Sur. And so we took everybody took everything there, and then our friend Rolla Stolzen had a waterbed which he put in the base of his range, what is it, Ford Ranger pickup truck, and he put the water in that there, and then we all camped, and then the Stevens provided a marvelous dinner. Then we went up to the cocktail point where we had a fantastic cocktail. And we came down for dinner, and then we had the costume show, and there was always a theme. And Anne and Dawn, I remember we have one picture of Dawn with like a rag, literally a rag mop over his head, and Anne was wearing some sort of a ridiculous thing. Sometimes she came dressed like a teddy bear.
She made a costume.
She made a costume. One time she came as a little dancing girl, and another time she had a costume. It was one of those costumes that it was a like a big T-shirt or something, and on the front it had this marvelous, beautiful little curvaceous lady front and back. She wore that, so that's the part of Anne that nobody knew. So I just wanted to say, what good time we had with Anne and Dawn. That's all.